Hello, good morning, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with lecture 6 today, which is nervous system part 2. In part 1 of the nervous system, we learned about the neurons and how signal is being transmitted down the axon and then from one neuron onto another. And lecture 6 is going to be focusing on more of the anatomy aspect of the central nervous system. We'll learn about the different parts of the brain and their corresponding functions, as well as various parts of the spinal cord as well. So let's start with the PowerPoint slides, just a couple of slides first, and then probably gonna take some notes, do some labelings. We actually will be doing a lot of labelings from the study guide today. So, if you have your colors and markers, please have them ready. So here we go. White matter and gray matter. The central nervous system, which once again consists of the brain and the spinal cord, they are made up of two types of substance, if you would. Okay, one of them is the white matter, the other is gray matter. Generally, you can think of white matter as responsible for transmitting signals. They are like cables that your computer is connected to. Okay, it transmits information from one device to another, right? And they are made up of myelinated axons. So remember, the myelin is responsible for speeding up conduction of signals along the axons. And within the central nervous system, um, the kind of cells that makes up the myelins are called oligodendrocytes. Okay, so these myelins are important for speeding up signal conduction. Okay, and the myelin are formed by oligo. We learned this before. Oligodendrocytes in the CNS. In the PNS is a different group of cells called the Schwann cells. But since we're just talking about the CNS right now, that's what we'll be focusing on. So white matter is for transmitting signal, whereas gray matter, they contain cell bodies, short non-myelinated fibers. Not all the axons are going to have myelin on them. If they're really, really short axons, and you actually don't need myelin. And the gray matter is primarily responsible for processing information. Okay? So the way that it is being organized is a little bit different in the brain than it is in the spinal cord. This is a frontal section of the brain. Like if you cut it here into front and back, you can see the outside is a little bit darker in color compared to the inside. So for the brain, the gray matter is typically on the outside, while the white matter is typically on the inside. Now, this is just a generalization, okay? You can see right here, there are some gray matter on the inside as well, but generally speaking, okay, it is gray on the outside and white on the inside for the brain. For the spinal cord, it is the other way around. You have the white matter on the outside and the gray matter, which forms kind of like a butterfly shape here in the middle for the spinal cord. So keep that in mind as we discuss the structures and functions of the brain and spinal cords, whether we are looking at gray matter or whether we're looking at white matter, because that's going to determine the function of those various structures, right? Is it responsible for, processing information, or is it primarily just for communication? Okay, so white is for communicating, gray is for um, thinking, if you would. All right. Now we have to protect our uh, central nervous system, obviously, because it's very delicate and it's prone to injuries. So there are various things that exist to protect them. The obvious protection would be like the bones that surrounds these structures, right? So the brain is protected by your skull, right? It's particularly your cranium. It's quite hard. And your spinal cord is nicely housed within your backbone. Okay, so more on that later. But now I want to switch to the study guide. There is this picture right here. And like I said, we're going to be doing a lot of labelings today. I hope you print out your study guide, and so you can follow along. And we're gonna start with this guy, which is basically a slice of the head, like around this region. Okay, so let me just show you the three-dimensional model. Maybe that's gonna be a little bit useful for you to visualize it. Okay, so right here, a slice of the head. We start with the skin right here. It's the skin. If you shave off your head, what you're looking at would be the skin, the skin of your scalp. And then beneath the skin, you would have the skull. Skull again is the bony part of your head, specifically. But like the whole head is called a skull, but the part that protects the brain, that's the cranium. Okay, cranium. I'll write down for you later. And then beneath the skull, you have three layers of connective tissue that makes up your meninges. Okay, meninges. You might have heard of meningitis, right? Meningitis is the inflammation of the meninges. So this meninges is actually three separate layers, and it covers the entire CNS. It covers the entire brain, covers the entire spinal cord. Starting at the most superficial layer, we have the dura mater. Okay, please note the spelling. This is M-A-T-E-R. It's not meta, it's mata. Dura mater. And the dura mater is actually two separate layers that are fused together. More on that in a bit. Beneath the dura mater, we have the arachnoid mater. Right? And the arachnoid mater has these like spider web-like structure. Okay, that kind of forms a little bit of a space cavity here. And arachnoid actually means spider web. Right? So this is like the spider web looking layer. And then finally, we have the pia mater that will be in direct contact with either the brain or the spinal cord. And you can see the darker color stuff right here of the brain. That's the gray matter I was telling you about at the beginning. And even deeper than that, you will have the white matter. So the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater, they all collectively form your meninges. Let's try to label this together. We have right here, again, just the skin at the top. This is from your study guide, right? So if you have a copy of it, please follow along. Now, underneath the skin, we have another layer here. That's just the epidermis. You know what? Don't worry about it. It's not important for our discussion. We just leave that alone for now. Um, I mean, if you really want to include it, then you could, but doesn't matter for now. Okay. Over here we have the skull. The skull, bone of the skull, and actually it is part of the cranium, as I said. Cranium. And then we have the dura mater. And in the 3D model, I was trying to tell you that the dura mater is actually two separate layers. Two separate layers. So we have one layer right here. Okay, that's one layer of the dura mater. And then I'm going to use a slightly different, I don't know if it's going to show. Yeah, kind of. Right there. And usually these two layers are stuck together, but at various locations, they will separate. It will separate. And when they separate, there is going to be a cavity like that. There's a cavity right here. Okay. So it's like this, I guess I can try to show you. So two layers of the dura mater, they are usually stuck together like that, stuck together. Okay. But then sometimes at various locations they would open up and then you have like a little hole, little pocket in between them. So let's label these things. Over here, that's the dura mater. It's actually both of these dura mater, two layers fused together. It's very durable. It's kind of whitish in color, very fibrous, like almost like the paper. Okay, it's not easy to tear it apart. If you pull on it this way, like obviously if you tear it this way, it's gonna come apart. But you know, it's rather fibrous, and it's the most superficial layer, the outermost layer that is in direct contact with the inside of the bones that protects the brain or the spinal cord. And like I said, it opens up at various locations. One of those locations would be like right down the center of the brain, and this pocket that you form as a result of the separation from the dura mater, that is called the durovenous sinus. Okay, so our venous sinus is a location for draining fluids in general. And there are, other venous sinuses in the body. This one is formed from the dura mater, so that's why it's called the durovenous sinus. Okay. Okay, so for those of you looking for this diagram, again, it is in someone is asking. This is the study guide from oh, you got it? Okay, great. Yeah, so just scroll down all the way. You're gonna see it. Okay, so the durovenous sinus is a location for draining excess CSF. Right? So there's a lot of information uh, that I cannot tell you all of it at the same time, but at the end, everything will fit into place. Okay, so CSF is cerebral spinal fluid. We'll talk more about it, but your brain is basically floating in this stuff. Right? So is your spinal cord. Okay? So you constantly make these CSF, um, and then we need to drain them somewhere. Right? So it goes to the durovenous sinus for drainage. Here, I'll put the name here for you first, and then we're gonna come back to it. Cerebral spinal fluid, cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, sorry, cerebrospinal fluid. There you go. Okay, now I am gonna do another layer here. I'm gonna do the pia mater first before I do the arachnoid. The pia mater is the deepest layer, and you can't really see it here, so you're gonna have to draw your own. It's gonna be uh, touching the brain directly. Sorry, I have to restart again. This thing is there's no alternative. This is the only software free one anyways that I can find. Um, so We just have to make do with it. Okay, let's see if it works better now. Right here. Okay, so the pia mater is going to be directly touching the brain. And it's going to go into the grooves of the brain. All right, and follow the bumps and the grooves all the way like that. Okay, it's almost like a shrink wrap that goes around the food, touching it very closely. Okay, so that is this label, and that is the pia mater. Pia mater. Okay? In direct contact with the brain. Okay? The description is in the PowerPoint slides. All right, so like I'm not gonna write it again. Direct contact with the brain or the spinal cord, right? Now, sandwiched between the dura mater and the pia mater is going to be the arachnoid mater, okay? The spider web looking thing. And these three things makes up the meninges. Meninges. So all those spider web structures, right, all these little web looking stuff, okay, that is um, part of the arachnoid matter, but it has a special name, I guess. It's called the subarachnoid space, and this space is filled with CSF. Okay, so that's why the whole brain is going to be floating in the cerebral spinal fluid, and the excess one would again drained at the dural venous sinus. This arrow is pointing at the darker material. So that is the gray matter. I know some people spell gray with A, which is totally fine. It's just like two different ways to do it. And then over here, that's the white matter. Okay. Yes, there's a question. Go ahead.
I'm just having a hard time seeing like where the difference is between the arachnoid martyr and then the subarachnoid space, like where
Yeah,
that
yeah, that's a good question. Okay. Yeah. So let me zoom in here. You see all these like furry stuff, right? That's the subarachnoid space. And the subarachnoid layer is basically, just right there, just underneath the dura mater. You see, that's the subarachnoid. Sorry, that's the arachnoid layer. And then all these things that comes from it, that's the subarachnoid space. Okay. So let me give you an analogy to help you sort of understand this. Not you, but like for everybody, I guess. One way to think about it is to think of your mattress. Okay, so there's the mattress. Okay, and then you sleep on the mattress. So the side you're sleeping on, that's the dura mater. And the underneath side, that's the pia mater. And do you know what's in your mattress? What kind of fillings is in the mattress? Yeah, springs, right? Exactly. There you go. That's the spring. Okay, so the spring here would be like the subarachnoid space. And then what the spring attached to at the top would be the arachnoid matter. Now, imagine this is not what actually happens, but imagine the space between the spring is filled with water. Okay, so all that water is basically like your CSF. Okay, and this here is the subarachnoid space. Okay, and then if you need to add the arachnoid uh, layer, again, it's just I guess I should stick with the same color. It's just a little bit of extra right there. Okay, that's all. Are we okay, guys? Any questions? First of many diagrams that we're going to be labeling. Okay, and you can see it again here. Right? The purple is the arachnoid meta, and then the space is right here. Okay, I will post the model link in the chat if you want it later. Back to the PowerPoint slides. It's everything I told you already. This is the diagram. It's taken from this part of the head. Okay, and you can see there is the durovenous sinus. All right. Uh, this is too easy. I'm not even gonna do the poll. What is the deepest layer of the meninges? Well, if you have been paying attention and labeling with me, you should know the answer is C, the pia mater. The durovenous sinus. Yeah, maybe this one is worth doing. Let me just launch the poll. Go ahead. Okay, not a lot of answers coming in, but that's okay. Uh, everyone who answered got it right though. It is between the two layers of the dura mater. Okay, so it's like my paper demo, right? Two things, they're usually stuck together, but they open up and form a little pocket. And that's the durovenous sinus, and it's for draining excess CSF. Next question, next slide. So let's talk a little bit more about the CSF. Let me see what's going on here. Okay. All right. So here we go. This is a lot of extra information, right? So stop me if I'm not making sense. The cerebrospinal fluid, or the CSF, surrounds the entire brain and the entire spinal cord, right? They specifically will flood the subarachnoid space that I was telling you about. Now, where do we make the CSF, and what makes the CSF? So it turns out in your brain there are four ventricles. You are familiar with the concept of ventricles from the heart. Right? The heart has like four chambers, two atrium, two and two ventricles, right? Similarly, in the brain, we have empty spaces, cavities inside, and we have four in total. They are all called ventricles. Okay, uh, lateral ventricles, third ventricles, and fourth ventricles. We'll label it in a second. Within these ventricles, and you can see two of them right here. Okay, that's one of your lateral ventricles, and then this is the other one. Okay, so left and right lateral ventricles. And I'll show you pictures of it in a bit. Okay, now within these ventricles, you will find a special structure called the choroid plexus. Choroid plexus. Okay, it's a special tissue that has lots of blood vessels in it. Okay. So each ventricle will have its own choroid plexus. So four ventricles, you will have choroid plexus in each one of them. So far, okay? Inside the choroid plexus, you will find a type of glial cells, which are called the ependymal cells. So glial cells are, once again, we learned this last lecture, it's supporting cells, right, in the nervous system, and you have different types of glial cells. Some glial cells will help you form myelin. Some glial cells will help you reabsorb neurotransmitters. And in this case, we have a type of glial cells called the ependymal cells, and they are found in the choroid plexus, which in turns are found in the ventricles of the brain, and they are responsible for making CSF. It's a continuous production. You keep on making it 24/7. Are you with me? Or do you need me to go through that one more time? All right. Thank you. Now, what does the CSF do? CSF, like I said, fills up the ventricles because that's where they're made, and then it will float um, in circulation. There's a path that it follows, and I'll draw that out for you in a bit. And then eventually, like I said, it will fill up all the subarachnoid space, and the excess ones will get drained into the durovenous sinus, right? Up here, right? Durovenous sinus, where it opens up the two layers of the dura mater separates, forms a cavity, and all those excess CSF is gonna go there. Now, what do we need the CSF for? How does it actually protects the brain and the spinal cord? Well, the CSF, first of all, like it's derived from the blood, right? That choroid plexus, that spongy tissue I was telling you about, is filled with blood vessels, and you basically extract part of the blood and create a CSF from it. So it's very similar to plasma, okay? And essentially, it forms a protective layer around the brain to prevent things like concussion. If you move your head forward really quickly, actually, I don't think this picture might not be very clear in terms of what I'm trying to tell you, but ignore the picture for a second, okay? If you move your head really quickly forward, which way does your brain move? This is your brain. Yes. Okay. If you move your head forward really quickly, your brain actually will move backwards. Okay. It's not like your brain moved backwards, but basically the brain is not moving fast enough, and then your skull is moving in to kick you, right? It's kind of like driving. If you stop all of a sudden, then you have a tendency to jerk forward, right? Okay. And then if your car speeds up, accelerate really quickly, then you have a tendency to move backwards, right? Or at least that's how it feels like. And that's what happens in the brain. Okay. If your head goes in one way, then the brain tends to go the other way. And if the movement is too quick, then the brain might collide with the side inside of the skull, and that creates a concussion. Right? So by having a layer of cerebrospinal fluid that surrounds the brain, it kind of cushions it a little bit, so it's not gonna, be colliding. If you have Jello at home, you can try this. You can put Jello in a box and you shake it, then everything's gonna fall apart. But if you add water first and then put the Jello in and you shake it, then it's okay. The Jello's not gonna, it's still gonna be bouncing around, but it's not gonna be you know, falling apart. Someone asked what's the difference between a concussion and a whiplash. Concussion is basically the brain hitting the inside of the skull, and bruising the brain essentially. A whiplash is more like your neck, right? Like, if you don't have the headrest in the car, and then the car speeds up very quickly, then you have tendency to the head to move back, and it could, hurt your neck, right? Basically. So that's the superficial difference, I guess. All right. Now, the CSF is derived from the blood, but in terms of the exact composition and what's allowed to go into the CSF is actually tightly regulated by the blood-brain barrier or the BBB. I mentioned the BBB last lecture, right? When I was telling you about the dopamine and the levodopa. So you can't just let everything that's in the blood to go into the CSF and then expose your brain to it. There has to be some kind of regulation to keep some of the harmful stuff or waste product out of your CSF, and that would be the job of the blood-brain barrier. Now, the blood-brain barrier is formed by another kind of glial cells, and they're called the astrocytes. Okay, star shapes cell, and it's not what most people imagine because you hear the word barrier, then you might think of like a film that you can hold up, right? Like an entire membrane or something like that. But it's not really like so. The blood-brain barrier is actually formed by these little legs, if you would, that are coming out from the astrocytes. Um, I guess it's hard to see on the diagram. Like I try to draw it for you, okay? And then maybe you will understand. You don't have to draw this, okay? Just watch. So this let's say this is the blood vessel, okay? Blood vessels. So if there is no nothing covering it, then things can come out based on what we learned in the previous unit, right? And then over here we're gonna have like the axon of a neuron, okay? And then so if the stuff can freely come out of the blood, then it will affect the neuron directly, right? So what happens is we're gonna have an astrocyte. Don't draw this. This is an astrocyte, which is a glial cell, supporting cell in the nervous system. And the astrocyte has a lot of these octopus legs, if you would, and at the end of it, there's like a suction cup. Okay? There's a little extension right there. Okay, so it's gonna cover part of the blood vessels, and on the other hand, it's gonna cover the neuron, and then like you might have another astrocyte here, and then it's gonna form another cover right here. Okay, and it's gonna form like more cover, and eventually, if you keep on doing this, then you get what the picture shows here, right? The entire blood vessel is actually covered by the feet of the astrocyte, and so is the neuron, and therefore it forms the blood-brain barrier in the sense that nothing comes out of the blood vessels unless it is being allowed by the astrocyte, and then the neuron is also shielded that way. So that's what the blood-brain barrier is. Okay, and the blood-brain barrier is uh, pretty good at keeping most of the harmful stuff out of the system, and just let useful nutrients go through. So water, gas, of course, like oxygen, lipids, soluble molecules, they all can cross. And those, of course, are needed by your neurons to function. Okay. So let's just do a quick summary for you first, because there's a lot of extra cells that we've learned, and it could be overwhelming. We learned about oligodendrocyte. Okay, this is in the CNS, and there's the Schwann cell, which is in the PNS, and these things form myelin. Do you guys remember myelin? It's like this is the axon, right? And then you have these little insulation that goes around it so that the action potential can jump, right? And it gets conducted much faster, right? On the previous slide, we also learned about ependymal cells. Ependymal cells, which forms, what does it form? Can someone tell me? Thank you. It forms the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. And now we have the astrocyte. And what do they form? I guess it says right here, right? It forms the BBB, blood-brain barrier. All right? Different types of glial cells performing various functions to either support the neurons directly or indirectly. Okay, CSF is formed by, we literally just wrote it down. The answer would be ependymal cells. All right, I'm gonna show you the ventricles now, and I'll try my best. It's really hard to do this virtually. All right, so here we have the brain, but it's a see-through brain. All right, if you have X-ray vision and you can see past the surface structure of the brain, then you can see the inside of the brain like that. So if you look at it from the front, you can see there are like two horn-like structures that are inside the brain, inside each half of the brain, right? And those would be the lateral ventricles. Right? There's no one or two. We just call them lateral ventricles. One on the left and one on the right. And we're looking at this from the front. And then there is the third ventricle and the fourth ventricle. If you look at it on the side, you can see it's a C-shaped structure that forms the horn-looking thing. And then it's a little bit pointy at the end. All right, let me try to show you the 3D models. 3D models right here. I'll post it in the chat again. By the way, like all these is on the Luminate platform. Okay, I have a folder called 3D models. It's getting more complicated now. It's not like the heart and the lungs where, it's very easy to visualize. Like for the brain, you really need to, study it with a 3D model, okay? So here it is. We can see the brain from the front, and you can see the horns right there. They've removed the left half of the brain, so you can see the ventricles more clear. And you can see that it kind of points a little bit pointy at the end. So this whole thing, this C-shape structure with the pointy thing at the end, that's the lateral ventricle. Okay? You have two lateral ventricles. Over here in the middle, you have this thing, kind of looks like with an eye in it in the center. That is your third ventricles. Remember, the lateral ventricle is already one and two. So right in the middle, you would have the third ventricle. And to go from the lateral ventricles into the third ventricle, there is a structure right here that connects it. Okay, so I cannot draw on this, but listen, right? Inside this lateral ventricles, you would have the choroid plexus, the spongy tissue I was talking about, and then that would keep on making CSF continuously. All the CSF is going to fill up the entire lateral ventricle, and when it's full, the CSF needs to go somewhere. It's going to go to the third ventricle. But to get there, you need to go through this little opening. Okay, an opening in the body is called a foramen. Okay, so this one is a foramen. It's a hole that connects the two ventricles. So we call that, excuse me, we call that the interventricular foramen. We'll label all these in a bit, okay? You don't have to write anything down. I'm just like showing you. Interventricular foramen. Okay, a foramen is a hole. Right? Small hole, big holes, all of them are foramens, okay? And then it's gonna go to the third ventricles in the middle. And from the third ventricle, you can see there is a duct that allows the CSF to continue to flow down to the fourth ventricle. So the fourth ventricle is this like triangular structure, triangular cavity that's located between pons and cerebellum. We haven't learned those yet. We will. And the duct that connects third to fourth is called the cerebroaqueduct. Cerebroaqueduct. So lateral ventricle, third ventricle, fourth ventricle. And then lateral and third is connected by the interventricular foramen, whereas third and fourth, they're connected by the cerebral aqueduct. It's a lot of information. I know. I know. I am totally with you. Okay, so let's take a look at a real brain. First of all, people have a lot of trouble telling whether it's the left half or the right half. And then they also have trouble telling which way is the front and which way is the back. So first of all, you want to look for this little spongy guy. Okay, that is the cerebellum. It's called the little brain. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But that is always at the back. Right? If you put your hand like right here, that's where the cerebellum is located. So that's the back, right? Which means this is going to be the front. Okay? Anterior, posterior. And do you think this is the left half or the right half? I guess it's hard to tell, but what do you think? Like, can we vote? You guys feel like voting? Left half or the right half? If you think it's the left, choose A. If you think it's the right, choose B. Yep, most of you got it right. This is indeed the left half of the brain, and how you can tell is y- um actually, you know what? I it's hard. I don't know how to explain it, but this is like you are looking at the left half of the brain from the right side. Okay, so much like the 3D model right here. Okay, you see they've cut away. So like you're looking at this from the back. This is the right half, and now you're looking at the right half from the middle. Okay, I'll show you more pictures and then it will make more sense later. Okay, now over here you see the gap, right? You see the gap right there? That is the lateral ventricle. But it's not that's not the whole lateral ventricle. Right? This is just the opening that leads into the lateral ventricle. Right? Like if you stick your hand into the lateral ventricle right there, you can feel it's gonna be like a C shape that goes all the way around, and then there's gonna be a pointy thing at the end, right? Look here. It's actually really big. Right? But we cut the brain in half, and the ventricle is like inside the brain, so that's why we cannot see it. Okay. Much of the lateral ventricle, it's like behind the screen, if you would. Okay. And then there is the third ventricle right here. Fourth ventricle is the triangle. Okay. Connecting the third and the fourth is this, uh, they call it another name, but don't worry, it's the cerebral aqueduct, AQUE duct. And then there is again, they use a different name, uh, but it's the interventricular foramen. Okay, it's like ramen, but with FO at the front. Right? So like a lot of these names, like older names, more classical names, we call them, they are named after people who identify these structures, right? But I think there is like a general trend to move away from those names now because some of the time it's really hard to remember everybody's name, and something like this, it gives it more meaning, right? The interventricular means connecting two ventricles, and foramen is a whole, right? So just by looking at the name, you kind of can tell what it does. Do the two lateral ventricles connect? Not, no, no, no. Look, so look, right here, that's one of the lateral ventricles, and then that's the other one. They do not connect, but they both have their own. Here, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. You can see they both have their own interventricular foramen connecting to the third, right? But you see, there's a gap between the two lateral ventricles. They don't touch. Is that okay? All right. Now I keep on saying this, but it's true. I really hope you have the study guide with you, okay? Because otherwise, it's almost impossible to learn these things well, if you're just watching me do it. So please print them out. We're gonna label this picture. Um, I'm just gonna copy it over. Can someone tell me, like, if you have it, what page is this for the study guide so other people can find it if they have trouble? There we go. Okay, and even if you don't have it, you should label it afterwards. It's page 9. Thank you. Page 9. Okay, let's try to label some of these things. Okay, and I will try to make it easy for you. So first of all, let's start with these little spongy looking stuff. Nothing's working again. Give me a second. Very sorry. Okay, let's try that one more time. Okay, so right here, there's this like spongy tissue, and then we have more of it here. Okay, so well, anybody know what that might be? It's like two words. Anyone? Yeah, yeah, it's okay. I guess it's just too overwhelming, right? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that is the choroid plexus. Very good. Choroid plexus. Okay, so each ventricle has its own choroid plexus. If you forget what it does, don't worry, I'm going to write it for you. Choroid plexus are basically tissue, okay, vascular, that means it has blood vessel, vascular tissue that contains ependymal cells, which makes which make CSF. So by the way, since neurons don't divide, so um, when a person gets brain cancer, it's not from the neurons themselves. It's actually from these glial cells. Okay, because these glial cells are capable of doing mitosis, and when they go uncontrolled division, then that's how brain cancer arises. So, for example, ependymal cells, if it becomes cancerous, then the cancer is called ependymomas. If we have astrocytes becoming cancerous, then it's called astrocytoma. Right? So, like different kinds of glial cells can contribute to different forms of cancer. Okay, so that's the choroid plexus right there, and we have another choroid plexus, and down here also another choroid plexus. There we go. Choroid plexus are everywhere in all the ventricles. Now, over here, this little gap, That is what? Can someone tell me what that is? That's right. That is the lateral ventricle. Okay, lateral ventricle. But remember, it's much bigger than that, right? It's much bigger than that. Right? But we're just seeing a little bit of it. Right? You can see the lateral ventricle is always under this little thick band of structure. And we'll label that later on. All right. What about over here? What about over here? This part? That would be E. Right? So E, that's the third ventricle. Third ventricle. And connecting the lateral ventricle with the third ventricle is this tiny opening, right? Tiny hole. And by now, hopefully you remember, it is the interventricular foramen. Foramen is a hole. Okay. Further down, we are looking for the triangle. The triangle right there. Okay. Triangle is the fourth ventricle. Okay, so that's the interventricular foramen, I guess, right there. And then connecting the third with the fourth is a duct. And that is called the cerebral aqueduct. There we go. And from there, it actually will continue to travel down. Okay, like the CSF is going to continue to travel down the spinal cord. And this actually would be like the base of the skull. Right? And there is a like an opening at the base of the skull. Right? So here we say the brain stem exits the skull and becomes the spinal cord. Okay. We'll talk more about the spinal cord later. And we're going to come back to this. So this here is the skull. Here, I'll show you. You see this at the base of the skull? This is looking at the skull from the bottom. You see that big hole right there? That's where the brainstem is going to come out, and it's going to become the spinal cord. Okay, we'll learn about that hole later on, but it's called the foramen magnum. I already told you foramen. Foramen is a hole. Magnum means big, right? Like, so big hole. That's literally what it means. Where am I? Right here. Okay, couple additional things that we should label. And this is going to be challenging to show you. I'll try. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit. Right, so this one and then this one. Okay. Let me see if this is gonna freeze. It freezes every time I use these arrows for some reason. Oh, yeah, there we go again. Okay, so I'll just have to not use the arrows for today anyways. Okay, so we just draw ugly freehand arrows. There we go. The purple, sorry, the orange layers, that's actually the dura mater. Okay, but they are separated because we're looking along the middle of the brain. And so, what should we put for C? What is the name of C? C is referring to the space between the separated dura mater. You can flip through the notes and see if you can find it. Yeah. So if you go back to here, you can see right? It's basically this space, right? And that is the dural venous sinus right here. Dural venous sinus. So we're gonna go back here and we're gonna label it. Drains CSF. Right, so that's the dura mater. Now, I mean, like when you have time, you can go through the whole, you can draw the whole thing. I don't have time right now. Um, what about this? What about this? Right, you're gonna have a layer that basically directly surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. And that would be the pia mater. There you go. And then in between, you will have the spider web looking things. Okay, and that would be the arachnoid matter plus arachnoid space. Sorry, subarachnoid space. And these stuff makes up the, let me try the shape again. Oh man. Okay. These makes up the meninges. That's right. Meninges. There we go. Meninges. Okay. So when you have time and you're looking for something leisurely to do, you can fill up all this space. Whenever you see an arrow, you just color it with blue. Okay, blue highlighter or something like that. Okay, I'm not gonna do it for the whole thing. You can do it. You can see all this stuff. Whenever you see the arrow, you just color it. Okay, so on and so forth. Okay, so that is the cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid. So it creates buoyancy to help the brain flow, protects the brain from concussion. It helps distribute nutrients and actually helps distribute neurotransmitters as well. All right, very busy diagram. Are we good? Does anybody have any question? All right, I hope you're learning this okay. Can you say again about the blue thing? Oh, yeah. No, I was just saying, right? Whenever you see the arrows, okay, you just color it with the blue. And that basically shows you where the CSF are, right? So like it surrounds the entire brain, right? The function of the CSF? Oh, yeah, sure. The function of the CSF is to, here, I'll write down, is to create buoyancy, right? Which basically allows the brain and the spinal cord to be floating. You don't feel the weight of your brain. Your brain is like, 2, 3 pounds. You don't feel it because it's floating in your skull. That's buoyancy created by the CSF. Distribute nutrients, neurotransmitters, and remove waste. Okay. That is what the CSF is for. And you make the CSF from the choroid plexus. All right. Let's summarize this in a flow chart. Uh, I mean, if you have the study guide, I think there's a question for that. I just don't remember where. Uh, right here. Okay, question number 4. Use a flowchart to show the flow of CSF. All right. Doesn't matter. You can draw it elsewhere. Okay. I haven't done this for a while. Uh, let me see if I can do it properly with the spacing and everything, I mean. So we're gonna have we're gonna start in the middle. We're gonna have lateral ventricle. Okay, we have 2 of them, right? One in each half of the brain. Horn shape with the pointy thing at the end. And from the lateral ventricle, they will go to the third, which is just in the middle. Okay, got the horn, and then you have the third, and then you have the fourth, right? I don't draw this. I'm just reminding you. Okay, remember the horn with the pointy tail? Okay, connecting the lateral and the third. Must be sick of me saying this now. That's the interventricular foramen. And I want you to understand that you would have the choroid plexus. That's going to be constantly producing the CSF, and it will fill up the lateral ventricles before it moves on to the third. And then I want you to also understand the third ventricle would also have its own choroid plexus, producing CSF, which would be filling up the third at the same time that CSF is coming in from the lateral. Then from the third is going to go to the fourth. And you know the drill now. The fourth also has its own choroid plexus, producing CSF and filling it up. Okay, so where do the choroid plexus gets the CSF from? It's basically from the blood, right? Now let's take a look at this over here. We have the brain. We're looking at the brain from the back. There we go. That's the brain. Brain stem, spinal cord. Now, I haven't teach you much about the spinal cord yet, but the spinal cord actually becomes like a ponytail at the bottom, right? More on that in a second. So we have the lateral ventricles, the third and the fourth. You don't have to draw this necessarily. Just watch first, okay? So from the lateral, it goes to the third and the fourth. We know this already. I must have talked about it for like 5, 6 times now. After the fourth, though, there is going to be a small canal inside the spinal cord. I'll show you a picture of it later. And it's going to carry the CSF all the way down to the ponytail. And then once it exits at the bottom, then it's going to come back up from the subarachnoid space. Okay, let's go surround the brain. And ultimately, it's going to go back to the durovenous sinus. Okay, so from the fourth ventricle, it is going to go to the central canal of spinal cord. And then it's going to exit to the bottom. Right, these things are going to go to the subarachnoid. This is like an oversimplification, okay? So if you read something more complicated than this, don't worry about it. And eventually from the subarachnoid space, it will go to the durovenous sinus, which would return it back to the blood. So that's the flow of CSF. Simplify. Does anybody know what condition a person will have if this flow is blocked or interrupted? It starts with a H. If it happens in babies, the head gets really big. Anybody know? The name of the condition when the flow of CSF is blocked or interrupted. Could be by a tumor, could be blockade of the drainage. No, that would be hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus. Water in the brain. That's basically what the word means, okay? So it occurs when drainage of CSF is blocked. In an infant, the ventricles can enlarge due to cerebrospinal fluid accumulation. As a result, the skull enlarges and the brain tissues between the ventricles and the skull will be compressed, sometimes resulting in brain damage. So in kids, in infants, the skull is not fully ossified, fully like hardened yet. Okay, like if you see the head of a baby, you can see like the pulsating right up here, right? It's not the brain you're looking at. It's just like because the skull is still so soft, you can see the pulsing. Of the blood vessels that are underneath it, right? And so if the fluid is accumulating in the brain of an infant, all those extra pressure is going to be pushing out, and then the skull kind of expand, and it results in like big heads, right? And for adults, it's different. Our skull is fully ossified already, fully solidified, and there's no room for expansion. So all the extra pressure is going to cause the ventricles to become enlarged to a degree that's greater than what's going to be happening in an infant. And so this is the normal lateral ventricles. These are enlarged. And all these tissues right here surrounding the lateral ventricles, they're going to be compressed and potentially cause damage. So what do you do in these situations? Well, they have to identify the cause of the hydrocephalus first, right? Like they have to know what's causing the blockade. If it's like a tumor, they will see if it's possible to surgically remove it. If it's caused by drainage problem, then they have to try to unblock the drain. But generally, they might have to install a shunt. And we talked about a shunt before. A shunt is just like a detour, right? For the fluid to drain elsewhere. Sometimes it's possible to connect a tube that drains it into the abdominal cavity, and that way it's going to alleviate the pressure that's building up inside the nervous system. Someone asked, what happens to a baby when the part of the head that pulses is hit? I mean, generally, like it's not good for the baby to hit their head, because the skull is not fully formed yet. But the pulsating part, like this sensitive part, people say like don't touch it because you're touching the brain. Right? That's not accurate. Like, it's not really the brain that you're touching. It's just the blood vessels that are beneath the skull, and so that part is not like extra sensitive versus the rest of the head. So it's you hit the head is bad anywhere, not just that particular portion. Okay, but babies are pretty resilient. My younger daughter actually, uh, she was able to do the flip earlier than we anticipated, and then we were changing diaper for her one time, and I guess we turned around and grabbed something, and she did a flip, and then she fell from the table. Like we were horrified. Okay, like she hit the head. She actually was like stuck between the table and the floor, upside down, head first hit the floor, and then the legs were up. Right? We freaked out. We took her to the hospital, and actually she was fine. So. I'm not saying it's okay to drop your baby, but I'm saying they are more resilient than we sometimes imagine they to be. Okay, so there you go. Hydrocephalus. All right, meningitis. Meningitis is the inflammation of the meninges, and it can be caused by bacteria or viruses. And people who are in high school or even college, they are more susceptible to getting meningitis. It's mostly because of their lifestyle. Okay, like they like to hang around in large groups. They might share a drink with other people, and it's just that kind of interactions that put them at a higher risk of getting meningitis. You can get vaccinated for meningitis. The government, OHIP, actually pays for these vaccines, but it only covers certain strains. Okay, if you want extra protections for additional strains, then you have to pay out of pocket for it. Symptoms include headache, fever, stiff neck, and if left untreated, very severe form of meningitis can lead to paralysis, coma, or even death. So how do you diagnose meningitis? You can do an X-ray or CT scan, and sometimes if they want to figure out whether it's bacterial infection or viral infection, they have to do what's called a spinal tap or lumbar puncture. So at your lower back, which is like around right here, you have four big backbones there. It's called the lumbar. One, two, three, four, five. Five. I say four. It's five lumbar bones. And between three and four, that's where they will insert a needle, and then they will take a little bit of the CSF, and then they will culture it. Okay. They just freeze your skin a little bit with some freezing agent, so you don't really feel the needle going in, and then they take a bit of the cerebrospinal fluid, and then they will grow it to see if there are any bacteria. Now that sounds really scary, right? And it is. But remember, the spinal cord I told you is going to become ponytail at the bottom. Okay, so like when you stick the needle in, the ponytail structure is just gonna like move up away from the needle. So you cannot at that location you cannot poke through your spinal cord. Okay, because of the hair looking structure. It's like, trying to take a needle and push it through your hair. The hair just gotta get out of the way, right? It's impossible for the needle to go through the hair, right? And that's exactly what happens when you try to do a spinal tap. Um, if you're a mother, you might remember giving birth, they might give you the epidural. Right? Epidural is like the numbing agent that takes the pain away during labor. That's also where you inject the the medication. Okay, it's the same place where you will be taking the CSF. So that's a spinal tap. Okay. Oh, that's the epidural I was telling you about. You see that needle goes in. They actually leave it in there. They tape it, and then you know, the, they let the medicine go in. Like I remember my wife doing it. There's actually like a button she can press to see, how much medication to go in. It's not without risks though, right? But the risks usually they say it's minimal. Uh, oh yeah, so someone is actually saying that, the epidural actually gave some uh side effects for months. So yeah, it's not 100% without risks. Why do they leave it in? Because it's like a continuous delivery, right, of the medication. It's not something that would just work once. Like you need to continuously deliver these drugs. Like if the person is feeling more pain, then they can press the button to deliver more of the medication. But there's like a maximum, right? Like you cannot exceed it. It's not like you can just deliver as much as you want, right? There's like a safety limit, but they leave it in until you deliver, basically. Yeah. Okay. The ponytail I was telling you about, that's called the cauda equina. It's Latin. Cauda means tail. It literally does mean tail. And equina is horse. So horsetail, ponytail, right? And we stick the epidural needle in, or if you stick a needle to get the spinal tap done, uh, the spinal cord would just move away. And that is it for now. Okay, let's take a break, guys. You guys need a break. I do too. Let's come back at what is it? 55? Okay, 9:55. And if you can, please print the study guide. We will use it more in the second half of the course. In the second half of the lecture. See you in a bit. And this is not the end of the class, right? By the way, you guys are saying thanks. Sure, you guys leave. We will have a second half, okay? Yeah, I'll see you in a bit, okay? Thank you. All right, here we go. Part two. So now we're gonna shift our focus to learning about the spinal cord. And you can see in this picture that the spinal cord is separated into different sections. We have the cervical section, which is like where the neck area is. And then we have the thoracic section, which there are 12 pairs of it. It's in the chest area. And then the lumbar section. And then we have the sacral. And then at the bottom, we have the coccygeal nerve as well. You don't really have to memorize the names, okay? But just know that there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves that will be coming out from between your backbones, actually. So let's start by looking at the structure of the spinal cord. And I think it's probably best if we just draw it out and in our own ways first before looking at the actual picture. And I think I have a slice of spinal cord somewhere here. Um, hmm, I thought I did. Give me 1 second. Oh, I see it. There we go. So number 7, there is the spinal cord. I'm just going to copy it over so I can put it on the notes for you. All right. There we go. That's the spinal cord. And some of the stuff is going to be review for you. And then I'm going to add some details in a bit as well. So the spinal cord, you will notice that the inside, there's this distinct butterfly shape, and the top of the butterfly is actually the front of the body. And in uh, in terms of this nervous system, instead of using anterior and posterior, we actually use words like ventral and dorsal. Okay, I taught you these things last semester at the very end. Okay, so ventral is basically the side of the tummy, and then the dorsal is the back. And instead of using anterior and posterior, for some reason, we use ventral and dorsal when we refer to the spinal cord. Okay, so that's the back, that's the front. The stuff that is in the middle, all this stuff right here, that would be the gray matter. Okay, remember, it's gray matter on the inside for the spinal cord and white matter on the outside. For the brain is the other way around. So, uh, let's take a look at additional information. I am so sorry. I have to keep on doing this. I don't know why. It was okay last class. So let's say you touch a hot surface, right? You're familiar with this concept. We talked about it before. That information is going to be traveling through the afferent pathway, and then is going to be entering the spinal cord at the back. Okay, so this here is a sensory pathway. Okay, sensory pathway with the sensory neurons, right? Carrying sensory information. And that typically enters at the back of the spinal cord. Within the gray matter, that's where you will find another type of neuron. Does anybody remember the name of that neuron? It's only found inside the CNS, and it's responsible for processing the information for you, deciding what to do with that information. What is the name of that? Very good. That is the interneuron. Interneuron. Okay. The oligodendrocyte is something else. Okay. That's for like forming the myelin in the CNS. So that's the interneuron. And then in this case, the interneuron is going to process the information. Oh, it's too hot. We got to remove the hand. And that is going to be sent out through this other neuron that exits from the front, and then it's going to join the sensory neuron actually over here. This is the motor pathway. Okay, with motor neurons, the information is going to go to the effector. Okay, we did this, remember? Let me show you a picture of the notes that we took. Right, it's this one, right? So more information, if you want a refresher, you can refer to your old notes. But now we are doing it in the context of the spinal cord. Like, how does it actually look, right? So on the side here, the sensory neuron and the motor neuron actually gets bundled together. And this is the spinal nerve. Spinal nerve. So it's like together, much like a telephone wire. Okay, you see the cord, but if you open up the cord, you have the incoming line and the outgoing line, right? One for receiving, one for transmitting. And that's what happens with the spinal nerve. You open it, there are two paths. One is the sensory path, the other is the motor path. Now, this here forms the reflex arc. Right? You touch the hot surface, your hand automatically removes itself. And then you realize, oh, I got burned. Right? But the realization that you got burned does not come until after your hand is already off. So what happens is when the sensory pathway comes in, yes, it will go and connect with the interneuron in the spinal cord, but at the same time, the path is actually going to split and it's going to go up to the brain. It's going to go up to the brain. Okay, somewhere along the way, it's going to cross the middle, and then it's going to go to the left brain. Okay? This is the right half of the body. This is the left side. So this path that goes up at the back of the spinal cord in the white matter, right? This is called the ascending track. Okay? We talked about track and nerve previously. Track and nerve are both bundle of axons, but the track is inside the CNS, in this case, the spinal cord, and the nerve is outside of the CNS. So this is going to go to the brain, and it's going to cross the midline. Right? At the brainstem, actually, but we'll worry about that later. Now, similarly, once it gets to the brain, then there is like higher functioning interpretation of your situation. Like, oh, then you realize, oh, I just burned my hand. And then what do you do when you burn your hand? Your body removed the hand for you, but afterwards, what do? Well, you might run it under cold water, you might blow onto your hand, you might put some aloe vera on or whatever, right? All those extra things that you do is determined by your brain and it's based on your previous experience, right? So then your brain is going to send a signal back down, right? And then it might not go to the hand, it might go to other places. Right? But that's going to be containing motor instruction and the pathway that's coming down. Okay? That's the descending track. And that generally travels at the front of the spinal cord. Okay, so all this white matter here, those are reserved for descending tracks. And then all the stuff at the back, that's reserved for ascending tracks. And then on the side is kind of mixed. Okay, I'm just gonna use purple, I guess. It's kind of mixed. Some goes up, some goes down. I'm not gonna worry too much about it. Okay. So that's the organization of the spinal cord and how, information is processed. Now, just one more thing here. Right in the middle, there's a hole. That is the central canal. If you forgot what that is, that has to do with CSF. After the fourth ventricle is going to come down through this tiny canal that's in the middle of the spinal cord all the way until the ponytail, right? Until the horsetail, right? Then the CSF comes out and then goes all the way back up, surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. and all the stuff we talked about before the break. Okay. This is an actual picture of a spinal cord. It's not pink. They stain it. Okay. It's more like ivory white on the surrounding and then kind of darkish brown in the center. But over here, you would have, once again, the sensory neuron coming in, enters at the back. Same thing for the other side, enters at the back. And you can see the nice butterfly, the upside down butterfly. Top of the butterfly is the anterior portion, and then this would be the posterior portion. And inside the gray matter, once again, that's where you will have your interneuron, and then the motor neuron will go out and then forms the spinal nerve right there. Okay, and remember, these things, they will be bundled together. Any questions? No, everything is crystal clear, I hope. If this is another model, I will put it in the chat box for you. So let me just zoom out first. What you're looking at is a chunk of your backbone. Your entire backbone is basically a bunch of these things stacked together, one on top of the other. Each one of them is called um, vertebrae. Okay, Vertebrae. Okay, vertebrae. And at the center of the vertebrae, you will have the spinal cord nicely tucked in there. And just zoomed out a bit again here. You see there is a little projection here at the back. So if you run your finger through your neck, at the back of the neck, like slowly, you can feel the little bumps, right? And you can do that along the entire back. And all those ridges that you're feeling, all those bumps, that's basically this part right here that is projecting from the back of your backbone. Okay, so over here, once again, we have the spinal cord, and you can see the spinal cord is surrounded by the meninges, the dura mater in this case, on the outermost layer. And right there in the middle, that hole, that's the central canal. Okay, and on the side, we can see um, the spinal nerves, right? It's you only see one nerve, but you know that nerve contains both sensory and motor neurons. Okay, the sensory will come in at the back, and then the motor will exit at the front. So there you have it. That's the spinal cord structure. All right, let's see what else we got here. This is the ascending tract and descending tract that I was telling you about. Once the sensory information comes in, it can form a loop and do reflex if necessary. But it's also equally important for the information to go up to the brain. So it's going to move up through at the back through the ascending tracts. It's going to go through a few other structures. Right? Part of the brainstem, you might remember learning it in the respiratory system, is the medulla oblongata. That is where it will cross the middle and continue upwards to the other side. It will go through various structures, the midbrain, the thalamus, all of which we will learn about later. And then it gets to a particular region of the brain called the primary somatosensory cortex, something we will learn later on. And then if you decide to do something about it, then you're going to follow another path coming down, but this time it's going to be at the front. Right? That's the descending tract. Okay, so if a person damaged the back of the spinal cord, they might no longer be able to feel certain parts of the body. If you damage the front of the spinal cord, they might be able to feel it, but not able to control certain parts of the body. Okay? So you can think of the spinal cord as information highway for the most part, um, taking sensory information up to the brain at the back and bringing motor information down at the front. But the gray matter in the spinal cord is also capable of um, executing various reflex for your body. Okay? Moving the hand away is just one example of spinal reflex. We'll see a few other ones shortly. If we take a slice of spinal cord, you can see the ratio of white matter and gray matter is not the same for all the sections. So C here is the cervical section closer to the neck. Here, I'll write down for you. These are the neck. Right? T is like the chest, and then these are like lower back. Okay. So you can see there are more higher percentage of white matter closer to the head than it is at the bottom. And I'll try to explain this to you. Okay? Just like ask if it's not very clear. Okay, so this is brain. Okay, and then we have this is like the whatever the face, the neck, the trunk. Trunk is like right here, right? With the arms and the legs, and then this is the pelvis and then the legs. Okay, trunk and arms. So what happens is all these places will have sensory neurons going up to the brain, right, through the spinal cord. Okay, spinal cord. This is gonna going up, going up, going up, going up like this. Okay. And then same thing, the brain will have motor neurons coming to the face, to the neck, to the trunk, to the pelvis, and to the leg. And all these things would be part of the spinal cord, right? Spinal cord. So if you take a slice of spinal cord here from the cervical region, right, cervical region, and you look at the spinal cord, then you can see it will have lots of white matter. Because look at all the sensory and motor neurons. These are all white matter, right? It's coming from all over the body. Whereas if I take a slice further down, like if I take a slice here, most of the neurons and the motor neurons and the sensory neurons are above that point, and you don't have a lot of it down here. So you would have less white matter. Okay, so if you look at the slide again over here, all these white matter, higher proportion, it's from all the sensory neurons and all the motor neurons that are moving through it. At the bottom, there are hardly any white matter left, right? All of them would have exited at the chest, at the pelvis region, and there isn't a lot of white matter left behind. Okay, so if I show you a slice of spinal cord, you should be able to tell me whether it's from higher up or lower portion. Okay, I'm not going to show you something that's like really unclear. Okay? It's gonna have like either lots of white like this or very little. You should be able to tell. Okay, reflexes. Reflexes are automatic response to a particular trigger, a particular stimulation that would happen without conscious thought. You don't have to think about it, and you don't have to learn about it. Right? It's something that it's hardwired into our system, and you are born with the ability to do these reflexes. Some reflexes will involve the brain, other only involves the spinal cord. So cranial reflexes includes salivation, sneezing, swallowing. No one taught the baby how to swallow. They just do. They just know. Okay, when there's food in the mouth, they know how to swallow. That's a reflex that involves the brain. Spinal reflexes, like touching the hot surface, removing the hand, that's a classic one. I've been using this example forever. That involves only the spinal cord. You might have heard of the knee jerk reflex. That's the one that looks like this. You tap, the person sit down and relaxes their leg, and then you tap on there's a tendon here called the patella tendon. You tap on that, and then it's going to cause the leg to jerk forward, right? So that's a spinal reflex. You can see the sensory neuron here. It's going to send the information to the spinal cord, and then there are actually two um, motor output here. One is going to go to your quadricep, and it's going to cause it to pull, to contract, and then the other goes to your hamstring, which is going to tell it to relax. And as a result, your leg jerks forward. There's the pinprick reflex. It's similar to touching a hot surface, but this time you touch something sharp, and then your hand, like, you see this in movies, right? Person like arranging the roses or something, and all of a sudden they get pricked by the thorns and the rose, and then they remove the finger. That's a pinprick reflex. So there are lists of spinal reflex, and as a nurse practitioner, maybe you will have to learn what these reflexes mean in terms of, if a person does not have the knee-jerk reflex, then what kind of injuries might the person have, and so on and so forth, right? So that could be important. There's also the Babinski reflex. Babinski reflex is something that happens in the babies, in infants up to 2 years of age, but it will disappear later on. Yeah, so if you have a baby lying around at home that's under 2 years of age, try this with them. Just pick up their cute little feet and take a pen, use the blunt end to run the pan this way at the bottom of the toe of the foot, and you will see their toes fan out like that. Okay, that's called the Babinski reflex, and it should disappear after age 2. If you do this to an adult and then they also show the Babinski reflex, then it is a sign of some kind of CNS disorder, and further investigation is needed. So some reflex will disappear as we grow up. Others will continue to stay with us. Okay, uh, like all these ones that we talked about, it's life term, lifelong. Another reflex that goes away would be the grasping reflex. If you put your finger into the baby's hand, they just grab it. Okay, they just grab it. It's a reflex, but obviously, when you do that to to an adult, they will look at you weird, like, why did you put your fingers into my palm, right? The reflex is gone, right? So that's spinal and cranial reflexes. Okay, let's see if you were listening. Go ahead. Very simple question. Yep, I'm gonna end it right there. It is the sensory information. Sensory information goes up to your brain through the ascending tract. This one is much harder. I'll give you a moment to read it. All right, thank you. So gray matter is found on the periphery. That's wrong. For the spinal cord, gray matter is the butterfly. It is in the center. Ascending tracts are generally located on the posterior side. Motor neurons emerge at the posterior side. Now, motor neuron emerges at the front. Uh, Gray matter forms the butterfly, not white matter. And this is correct. Okay. If you look at the drawings we have, you can see the gray matter has part of the has the entire interneuron and part of the sensory and the motor neuron as well. That's because it needs to make a synaptic connection with the interneuron, right? So that's that. Okay, now we're gonna do brain anatomy. I think we're just gonna label some more diagrams and call it a day. All right, we'll go through the slides next week. Um, no class on Monday. It's family day. Enjoy the time off, and we'll do more next Wednesday. But before we go, let's label some of these diagrams first. Let's get that out of the way. Okay, so a lot of stuff I'll be telling you now, I'll repeat next time with this with the PowerPoint slides, but do try to write them down as much as you can. So this is a very simple looking brain, and you can see the brain is not smooth. Okay. Yeah, there's another question. Test one covers uh test. Well, you already did your test though, right? Um, you mean for the quiz? Is is that what you're asking? Quiz two, right? Quiz two is going to be lecture five only, right? Yeah, there is no midterm, right? There's no midterm. Everybody's asking me about midterm, all my other classes as well. There's no midterm. This is it. Okay. So quiz two is gonna be here. Let me see. I don't actually remember the schedule. Yeah, that's okay. I'll explain it anyways. I'm sure other people might be. Oh, there's another message. Stop messaging me, people. Okay, email me instead. Um, so let's see what's coming up for our course. Okay, we are on the 12th today. No class on Monday. Wednesday, you will have your quiz. That's only lecture five. And we will have a class as well. And then engagement week. And then nothing, 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 nothing. And then lab two and test two. Test two will be 6 to 8. Okay, so that's that. All right, let's go back to here. So the brain is not smooth. It has all these grooves and all these bumps to it. So a bump in the brain is called a gyrus. Okay, plural is gyri, and a groove is called a sulcus or sulci for plural. If it's a really deep groove, then it might be called a fissure. Deeper groove, it's a fissure. Okay. So this is this here, the whole thing. It's I'll just put an outline around it. When I say brain, when people hear the word brain, that's the part they usually visualize in their head. Oh, brain, like that. So that is actually just part of the brain, and it's called the cerebrum. Cerebrum. And the cerebrum is separated into different lobes, and each lobe has different function. So over here, um, let's let me think about how to do this. Okay, so let's outline these things first. Over here, we have the lobe at the front. That's C. It is called the frontal lobe. Okay, and the frontal lobe is responsible for like basically human stuff, right? Things that makes us unique as human beings. So, for example, uh, personality, uh, calculations, abstract concepts, like the concept of time is abstract, right? Like, and we understand that, right? Like future, past, right? That's abstract stuff that's happening in the frontal lobe. Voluntary movements, okay, speech, all this stuff happens in the frontal lobe, which is right here, frontal lobe at the front. And then over here, we have, it's kind of like, drawing maps, right? With the countries and regions and whatnot. Over here, we have the parietal lobe. And the main function of the parietal lobe is to process uh, it's called somatosensory information. Basically, these are things that you can feel from your touch, okay, and things you can feel from your muscle. So, what kind of stuff can you feel with touching? Like you touch an object, like what kind of information can you feel from it? Yeah, temperature, good. What else? Yeah, temperature, texture, right? Soft, hard, uh, pain, right? All those things that you can feel with your hands, with the skin and the muscle. That's gonna go here into the parietal lobe. Right? So frontal lobe is right here, parietal lobe is right here. Okay. It's like you forgot to hand in your assignment. Oh no, right? Like that. You're touching your parietal lobe. Right there. So there is a sulcus. There's a groove that's separating the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe, and it's right here. There's a big groove right there. Everybody has that. It is called the central sulcus. Okay, you can see me wearing my headset here, right? Right, so like along the side right here, that's about where the central sulcus is. Okay, central sulcus. Now, this next part is a little bit confusing. In front of the central sulcus, the whole region is the frontal lobe, but there is a special gyrus here. A special gyrus here. Okay. So let me just write out for you first. This is called the precentral Gyrus. Gyrus is a bump, right? A bump. And this bump is in front of the central sulcus. So precentral gyrus. Now, on this precentral gyrus, there is a functional area, right? So it contains, the precentral gyrus contains the primary motor cortex, which is where voluntary movement originates from. Okay. So every time you deliberately move a body parts, like right now, I'm moving my hands, I'm talking, blinking my eyes, all those things, and you're writing notes, all these are voluntary movement. It came from the primary motor cortex, which is located on the precentral gyrus. So people get confused between like this. So as an analogy, you can think of precentral gyrus as like Scarborough. Okay, so it's like a region, Scarborough, and primary motor cortex would be like Centennial College. So Centennial College is basically a structure, a building located in Scarborough. The primary motor cortex is a functional area that is found on the precentral gyrus. Okay, so precentral gyrus describes the location, and the primary motor cortex describes the function um, associated with that region of the brain. Okay, more on that in a bit. Now, if you understood that, then the next part will be uh, very, it will be easier. Behind the central sulcus, you would have another bump. This bump is found on the parietal lobe, and you can probably guess the name. It is the post central gyrus. Okay, it's a bump that's behind the central sulcus. And what does it do? Okay, so this one contains the, running out of colors here, contains the primary somatosensory cortex for interpreting body sensations, I guess, e.g., uh, touch, pain, temperature. What else did you guys say? Texture, right? Touch. Yeah, texture. Right? Feelings. Right? Not like emotional feelings, but like feelings from touching stuff. So I'll come back to this, but hold on. Remember this picture? Yeah, you touch something hot, they travel up the spinal, sorry, the sensory nerve goes into the spinal cord. Right? Sure, you have your reflex, but this is going to go up the ascending tract, going to cross the middle, and it's going to go to the brain. Where does it go? Because it's feelings that you pick up from the hand is going to go right here into the primary somatosensory cortex. Is that okay? Now, we will talk more about this next time, but the um, cortexes here, both of them, they are actually zoned into different areas. For example, over here, that's where, oh, you cannot see that. Let me choose a different color. For example, this is where you can control the hand and feel the hand. Okay? And then further down here, that's for the face. This is where you will feel the face, sorry, control the face and feel the face of the other side of the body. Okay, so we're looking at the left brain here. So if I want to move my right hand, it would have to originate from this portion of the brain. If I'm feeling things with my right hand, it would go to this region of the brain. If a person has a stroke here, they can still feel the right hand, but they cannot move it. If a person has a stroke here, they cannot feel the right side of the face, but they can still move it. Do you understand? The front portion is for movement, voluntary movement, and the posterior side is for feelings, sensations from the body parts. Okay, I'll show you a more detailed map later. Okay, like obviously it's not just the hand and the face, right? You gotta move your legs and you gotta move your, various parts of the body as well. I hope that makes sense. Okay, that's all the hard stuff, guys. We're almost there. Let's go through the easier stuff and call it a day. At the back right here, we have another lobe. That is the occipital lobe. Occipital lobe. Occipital lobe is for vision. Okay, things that you see with the eyeballs is going to go to the occipital lobe. On the side, we have another lobe right here. Okay, and this is called the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is for sound, right? So hearing, I guess, auditory information, plus smell. And there is another sulcus here, but this one is deeper. So they call it the lateral fissure. There's another one at the back here. Yeah, don't worry about it. Um, I mean, like you can see each region is separated by a fissure, right? They don't have a label, so I'm not going to add it. Okay, two more special area, and then we are done. On the left side of the brain, and it's mostly on the left side for people, okay? Like majority of the population would have this area on the left side. Some people have it on the right, but most people have it on the left side. It's around here. That is called Broca's area. Broca. Broca's area. That is for producing speech. Using the right words, moving your tongues and lips and into the right shape, I guess, to produce certain sound. It's all originating from the Broca's area. Broca is a person, okay? It's a patient actually who suffer from damage in this area, and then people started studying that area and then name it after him. Okay, if you damage the Broca's area, then you will have trouble communicating with other people. You might be using the wrong word in the wrong context. You might have trouble finding the right word to describe what you're trying to say. Okay? More on that next week. Broca's area. Like if you think about English, right? Like how do you say these words? Right? If you really try to enunciate them, like your lips and tongues would have to do different things. Like this one is like va va va, and then to say la la la, you have to move your tongue more, right? And this one you have to kind of put your lips together, like ba ba ba. And all those lip configuration and tongue placement, Broca's area. Okay. Of course, it has to communicate with the primary motor cortex to achieve that. What about understanding what people are saying to you? Like understanding what I'm telling you about. There's another area right here in the temporal lobe, and that is called the Wernicke Wernicke's area. Okay, there's another person's name. And this is for comprehension. Comprehension of verbal and written communication. Okay, so to understand what you are hearing and what you're reading, you need this Wernicke's area. Okay. So this, if this is damaged, then you would have receptive aphasia. You can't understand what people are saying to you, even if it's a language you speak. Okay, absolutely last thing, I promise. Right here, the little brain at the back. They always color it brown. I don't know why. This is the cerebellum. Please don't confuse the cerebellum with the cerebrum. Okay, cerebrum is the bigger brain. Cerebellum is the tiny brain, at the back. Not so tiny, but it's about like almost like your fist. And cerebellum basically helps you maintain posture and balance. And we'll learn more about this next time. But it also stores uh they call it like muscle memory, right? Okay. If you can type without looking at the keyboard, that's the cerebellum doing a good job remembering the position for you. Right? If you can ride a bike, even if you haven't ride a bike for like 5, 10 years, they give you a bike, you can still ride it with no problem. That's because things that are stored in the cerebellum, they tend to stay there for a very long time. It's different from, you know, remembering these things. Right? These things, if you don't study it for a week or two, you forget about it because that's not stored in the cerebellum. These are not muscle memory. These are factual memories, and it's stored elsewhere in the brain. Okay. And in those regions, if you don't use it, you will forget them. But for cerebellum, very persistent. I think that's a healthy place to stop, right? It's like crazy amount of information I dumped on you this morning. I'm so sorry. I hope it kind of makes sense though, but you have to go through it yourself, right? And so kind of sort through it and see if you have any, questions or whatever. Please feel free to find me. Otherwise, please enjoy your family day, and I will see you next Wednesday. Have a good one, guys. Take care.